Hello there, everyone, and welcome back to The Lovely Grind. My name's Michael Preby, and my website's lovelygrind.com. That's where you can read blog posts from me and find more information about how to connect with me in coaching, or sign up for my courses, or my Support and Success monthly membership area. So I hope you'll check out lovelygrind.com. And I thank you for checking out this YouTube channel and for coming to watch today's video, which is about the great withdrawal symptom paradox. So before I get into the topic, just to recap my story, I was on Paxil, an SSRI antidepressant, and Xanax, a benzodiazepine medication. I was put on those medications in my final year of college, or right before my final year of college, for panic and anxiety I was experiencing. Ended up taking those medications for over a dozen years. My benzo prescription kept going up and up and up until it was at 4 milligrams daily. Eventually, around my mid-30s, I made the decision I need to get off these medications, and I did. But when I did, I was hit by some withdrawal that was really painful and confusing, and I didn't know what to make of it. But that wasn't the whole story. I kept moving through the process, healing happened, and then more, and was able to get past that withdrawal experience. So there is hope, there is healing. That's the take home from really all my videos, but there's a lot more that we'll cover with regards to today's topic. So again, the topic is with some of those withdrawal symptoms that can feel so scary, the ones I was surprised by and frightened by, what to make of them. How do we contextualize those and see them? And there's really a bit of a paradox. And first, let me just read you the definition of paradox before we even get into the withdrawal symptom paradox. So, a paradox is defined as a seemingly absurd or self-contradictory statement or proposition that, when investigated or explained, may prove to be well-founded or true. And one such statement with regards to withdrawal symptoms would be this: withdrawal symptoms mean that a beneficial process is underway. I mean, that certainly seems contradictory or absurd, doesn't it? When your anxiety is at a 10 out of 10, when you're in the throes of deep depression and dread, when physically you don't have the energy to get up out of a chair, right? When your digestion or your sleep is disrupted, when these things are happening, it sure doesn't feel like something beneficial is happening. Quite the opposite is what the mind's going to tell you. What the mind's going to tell you right away and over is, something's wrong here. Something's wrong here. Something's really, really wrong here. This isn't normal. Something's wrong here. And if it's been like more than a week or a month, or if you're like me and you're going through a protracted withdrawal experience, you say, okay, maybe it was okay for like a week or a month, but longer than that, something's really wrong here. This isn't normal. This isn't normal. Okay. When that starts happening in your mind, let's just try to, dial back the hysterical and negative talk for a minute and think of things this way. Yes, these things can be and are normal for some of us getting off these medications. And no, it doesn't mean that something is really, really wrong. As a matter of fact, it can mean that something good is happening. And that's what I'm going to get into and dissect a little bit today. I remember back when I was going through withdrawal, I remember reading online, someone had put a really good analogy of the withdrawal process being like an old historical home that's being rehabbed. And for me, that was interesting because when I started going through withdrawal, I was living in an old historical home that me and my brothers and my wife and a sister-in-law were trying to rehab. And it was a lot of work. There was a lot of disruption. We had to keep moving from floor to floor. There was a lot of noise. There was a lot of mess. Kitchens being moved from the first floor to the basement. Bathrooms being, ripped apart. We redid everything. It had 4 different historical periods this house was from, including some from the 1800s. From the electrical to the plumbing to ripping out lathboard and redoing the roof and everything in between. It was a mess, and there was confusion, and there was noise, etc. Well, in the post I read online when I was going through withdrawal, the person said you could think of the withdrawal process as like rehab work being done on an old home. There's a lot of noise and mess, a lot of discomfort and disruption as these systems are being ripped apart and reconfigured, the electrical and the plumbing, as walls are being ripped out. But little by little, you start to see the beauty come through. And then there's new walls being put up and carpeting being put in and maybe new appliances, and you can see the peace and the beauty and the beneficial aspects of all this work that was going on that felt so disruptive and maybe even confusing and scary at the time. It's a really nice way to think of things, and I think there's a lot of truth to that. So what are some of the benefits that are going on even as the confusion and mess is going on? Well, emotional depth and breadth are returning to a person. There's a lot of numbing that goes on medications. A lot of times people might even report not crying at the death of a loved one, not being able to feel much at all when things are going on in the way of grief or excitement or sadness or anything else. It's kind of just flatlined. And maybe that prospect almost seemed appealing when you're put on the medications and you're going through some distress in life, but over time, it's disturbing. And so you come off these medications, and the way I referred to it once upon a time was you start to become unfrozen. Little by little, the emotional experience starts to become unfrozen. You start feeling things again. And it feels very intense and confusing at first, especially for those of us who are on meds for any length of time. And at first, the pendulum seems to all be swung in the negative direction of the emotional experience. But little by little, it starts to have some of the good in there and then get more to a little of the normal balanced experience. But again, in general, if you're feeling something, that's a good thing. It's better than feeling nothing. It means that something positive is happening. It means there's a normalization occurring, a rebalancing occurring where you can have the emotional experience which has some good and bad of a regular human being. Right in line with that, awareness is returning. Okay, and sometimes maybe it's hyper awareness, okay, or a person's really sensitive to lights and noises and everything else, but sometimes you're just flat out noticing more than you did on the meds, and that's a cause for increased anxiety. Like you start seeing some things around you or within you that maybe disturb you at first or anger you at first or whatever, and everything just seems so overwhelming, and it interplays with that emotional pendulum being swung to the negative and the sensitive stress reactions. But ultimately, the fact that you're noticing more is a good thing. Awareness is returning, both externally and internally. And that's a benefit of what's happening, even though it feels very chaotic and even scary at times. And neurochemically, there's a rebalancing act that's going on as well. So it's not just a flood of feel-good neurochemicals like GABA and serotonin all the time, but it's little by little working to return to an even watermark, right, between some maybe so-called stress chemicals and some feel-good chemicals, and the balancing act that happens as our body reacts to stressful situations and periods of anxiety. And again, that's all tilted towards a very disturbing negative at first. Like when I came off the Paxil, there was, I believe, such a dearth, such an insufficiency of serotonin in my system that all I was left with was complete flatness and anhedonia, an inability to feel anything good or think of anything positive or hold a positive thought. That was very disturbing. It was like my system had become so atrophied it didn't know how to find or hold on to serotonin without these medications in the picture. Well, little by little, things started coming back online and restoring themselves balance-wide, and my body was able to get back in touch with good natural stores of serotonin and so forth. And you start to have some sunshine peek through the clouds in the form of good emotions or a positive emotional experience or a positive activity, a way you feel being connected with people when you're in a room with them. So be patient. I know all this stuff that's going on feels very chaotic, very scary. It's really messy. It can be messy with our jobs and messy with our relationships and messy with our self-esteem and self-image. But try to, again, put things in the proper context. These symptoms don't mean that something's going wrong, even if for some of us they last a while. They're in fact signals of something going right. That's the paradoxical statement. That's the truth to keep coming back to. And I had to keep coming back to it again and again and again and again, and perhaps you will too. Doesn't matter how often you have to come back to it. Just make sure you come back to it. Okay, so even if these symptoms are there, you tell yourself, ultimately these things are a sign that something beneficial is happening behind the scenes here. And someday, if I see this thing through, there's going to be a whole lot greater balance that happens, and I'm going to be able to really be proud of myself and feel good about my decision to stick with this and see this process through. And that's the final point in this video, right? There's personal growth that's happening. That's a benefit. You're proving something to yourself here. You're proving something to yourself in the way of endurance and follow through and grit and determination. And also, if you're making a point to get closer to God, you're growing spiritually. And that's more important than anything. If you can grow your faith through this despite everything else that's going on, then what else could be more important? So keep coming back to these benefits and keep coming back to the hope of a better future that you're working towards in this process, and keep coming back to videos like this that I make and that other people make who have gone through it to tell you there's light at the end of the tunnel, because I know that's just priceless when you're scared and feeling alone and confused in this process. My name is Michael Preby. My website's lovelygrind.com. I hope you'll go to that website, find out how to connect with me in coaching or in my courses or membership area, read some of my blog posts. I hope you'll keep coming back to this YouTube channel and watching these videos. Until next time, please remember to take care of yourself and your dreams.